my work is always a mixture of defining a concept, but it's a very theoretical concept of how I want to work with algorithms. And I have a barely vision in which direction I want to go aesthetically, but I use code to find something and not to replicate something. So I don't code because I want to have a car with spinning wheels or something like. I really want to discover some things that I cannot imagine. So that's how I work. I start coding and it's experimental, and either you find something that is surprising or you adjust and or restart and keep going. And I always have the pixel in mind. For me, it's a lot about pixels, and my research is how can pixels move on screen and what does that do to the spectators.
Hello, friends. Welcome to another episode of Carlos Podcast. Today's guest is an artist, Kim Asendorf, which is very hard to label into a specific current because he creates generative art, but it can also be labeled as glitch art or internet or net art. He told us a bit about why he doesn't want to be fitting a mold. And we had an exciting conversation about his journey from before discovering NFTs, from when he was at art school, after discovering NFTs, and recent times, specifically his latest release, PXL DEX, which is an exciting collection that merges NFTs and fungible tokens. It has some exciting mechanics and technically is one of the most advanced collections I've seen to date. Thanks again for tuning in, and don't forget to subscribe, like, and share the episode if you enjoyed. Also, a reminder to check out my newsletter if you haven't, where I share weekly opinion, thoughts, trends, and whatever caught my eye in the crypto culture markets. Thanks again for tuning in and hope you enjoyed. Hello, Kim. It's a pleasure to have you in the podcast. How are you today?
Hi, Carlo. I'm fine. Thanks. I hope you too.
Where are you based, Kim? You're in Germany, right? That's where you're from? Are you in Germany right now?
Yes, I'm in Germany, in Bremen, which is
Bremen.
a Hanseatic city in the north of Germany, uh, pretty close to Hamburg.
To Hamburg. Yeah, your background reminds me. So my room, I used to live in Munich. It's not in the north of Germany, in the south, but I had a room with a window very similar to your window. I had my computer next to it. And yeah, I used to live in Munich for 4 years. It was a long time ago, but I really like the
How's
city.
German?
It's fantastic, fantastic. It's not great. But I know the basics, very, very simple stuff, the numbers and how to order bread and beer. That's it, the important
Yeah,
things.
that's good.
Cool. So Hamburg. And you live there in Hamburg, Kim? Because I was reading an interview with the Right Click Safe, and you mentioned you moved to Berlin some years ago. Are you based now in Hamburg or Berlin? Where?
I went to Kassel initially in like 2006 to study at the art school.
Mm.
And after that, 2011, I moved to Berlin and lived there for like 5, 6 years. And at some point, I had to get out a bit of the city again. And now I live more in a suburb-like situation around
Mm.
Bremen, which is, pretty silent. I mean, I grew up in a silent space, and I really appreciate this, that there is literally no noise when I go to bed or when I'm the last one awake in my area here, and it's really totally dead.
And you work at night then? Are you like a night owl, or you don't have a time to work? When did you code usually?
I usually prefer to code not at night. I mean, but I don't really get up and start coding. It's in the morning. I would rather do organizing stuff and but when you are on a project and really into the zone, then there is no time anymore. It's like it doesn't matter what time it is. If there's a problem that you are solving or something that is just going, can get very, very late.
Yeah, I can imagine. And I mean, your latest project, Pixel Deck. I mean, it's really fascinating, Kim. I'm really excited because I want to hear from you how it works, right? So people get an understanding, but just a quick summary. What I find fascinating is that you manage to combine, fungibles and non-fungibles into an artwork, but at the same time you kept your aesthetic, right? Your style, your particular style that we have seen from your previous collection. So can you tell us a bit about Pixel Deck and the mechanics, the concept, how you came up with the idea? What can you tell us about it?
Yeah, I mean, I would say generally my work is very much inspired by the internet as an exhibition space and as a canvas, and that's what I've been doing for all the years. I don't know, 15 years maybe, or nearly 20. That I wanted to create art that can be experienced immediately, basically in the same moment when I create it. I can upload it. I can have my own website and have this direct conversation with other people about the work, and that's something that I still enjoy a lot. Pixel Dex somehow plays with that as well. At its core, it's a website where you go and where the experience happens, and that is a very important part. It's not about just going to a platform and press a mint button, like a generic mint button, or for every work that is minted about a certain platform. So I think this experience that people have on the website, that is like a huge part of the work for me. And that's where I spend a lot of time in designing or creating this experience. And it's really difficult to explain how I do it. I think it's a very long process until I know what I want. And of course, it starts with, let's say, aesthetics, or in the recent years, my work became much more about aesthetics, but also more about systems as a sort of art. So it's not just an abstract, let's say, image or animation. I think it's really a bit an expression of the complexity of everything. Like our life and our world is meanwhile a black box. So if you just focus on your daily life, I think you maybe can even be a happy human. But if once you start looking out into the world, or in specific topics, let it be finance or just whatever you work at, it's a big black box, and it's so complex that these impressions that I gather from all this somehow become that what I want to capture in the work. And that is, for my understanding, that is only be possible through coding. Because to deal with such complexity and to express such a complexity and even a dynamic, which is also part of the complexity we are facing, I need to work with code, and I need to have animated things. And eventually I came basically to this point that to deal with this complexity, I can only use a pixel as the smallest building block. If it becomes bigger, it's not enough. I cannot show enough what I want. So a pixel is the smallest building block in multiple of my works, starting, I think, not starting, but recently with monogrid as the first, let's say, collection that was really created with the NFT space and blockchain in mind. But also the years before, my aesthetic was always about working with the pixel. But it takes years to get aware of what you are doing. So and at some point I decided, or I had the urge to go deeper into the media blockchain. So like, not just using it as a certificate or sales mechanism or anything like this. So I really wanted to explore what is possible through the blockchain, or even only with the blockchain. Long story short, I had the intention to make more complex work on the smart contract level. So I write my smart contracts myself. So it's part of the work. It's not just a carrier for the work. It's really part of the work. And so I created or I wanted to create a work where multiple things came together in a way. And I made a lot of tests, and it went through basically a few years now that I experimented with this topic, and it either became too complex, so that you could not understand the idea anymore, or it was not interesting enough. I think with Pixel DEX, I found this small hairline between these two extreme,
complexity
and
and still
simplicity.
being, yes, exactly that. It's very complex, but at the same time, if you take 5 minutes, you can understand it really well, right? If you take the time to play with it and read maybe short description, then you get it, right? If you are in the blockchain, right? Because at the same time,
Absolutely, absolutely.
yeah.
This is a work where the audience is people with some blockchain knowledge. Definitely, I think this is a bit an avant-garde attitude, even. Yeah, like, hey, I want to work with the newest medias and technologies that are available, but to a broader mass. Yeah, not just in a laboratory or scientific sense, but so that has also always been my or part of my practice, taking new technologies that pop up, APIs from Facebook, Flickr, or whatever, and use them in my practice. So the blockchain is for me exactly that. It's like an API I can use and integrate, and it's accepted and accessible to a broader audience. And so this work combines, like you said, fungible tokens and non-fungible tokens. Yeah, I think that was the maximum for now, in the sense of complexity, that you can understand it. Like you said, you can go to the website, and if you have an understanding of crypto and a bit an understanding of digital art, and have visited some websites, you can figure it out. It's still a little riddle. Yeah, like it's not a straightforward designed website. My art and my websites are always a bit edgy, and that's what I want for art. Yeah, I don't over design things like a graphic designer to have these oddballs on the way, all the way. And but there's also a very nice essay written by Kevin Bust on the website. And so I recommend reading that. I needed somebody else to come with an objective or more objective view to explain a bit what is going on.
Yeah, we'll add the link in the show
Yes,
notes so
please.
people can find it.
Yeah, so the idea, simply said, let's simplify it and take the aesthetics away for a moment. I worked with pixels all my life, so to speak, and now I tokenize pixels. Yeah, and that's a bit like the conceptual part of it. I tokenized my building blocks, my primitives that are used in a lot of works, and
As a
I made,
fungible, right? That the pixels are the fungible part. It's like saying Bitcoin, right? Or saying ETH, right? Or saying
absolutely, yeah.
any
It's
token, right? So pixels are now a token in the blockchain, right?
exactly. It's a standard token written with the Open Zeppelin ESC libraries. So it's a standard token, like literally any token on the Ethereum blockchain. And what I did is I gated this token a bit in my smart contract, so there's no public sale or anything like this. So it's only my idea about it. It's that it's a utility token or an art coin for my work. Yeah, so it's not a meme coin or a shit coin. It's not a financial instrument that I created to just sell pixels or create a financial dynamic somewhere. But I still like that it's an open coin standard that theoretically allows for everything. Yeah, so that's a bit the ethos somehow of crypto, this openness, and that you when you own something on the blockchain, you basically own it. And that's the new shift here, that ownership about digital things creates, or is maybe the last thing that was needed to create digital objects. Yeah, so digital objects don't exist if nobody owns them. And
Yeah.
with this ownership on the blockchain, they become just more real. And I think that is something that I like a lot. And
So what do you do? No, that's a great, very deep explanation. And I totally get the concept and what you're coming from. And I like what you're mentioning about the pixels. That's kind of the smallest the smallest, let's say, that particle, right, in your work. And now, thanks to ownership and how you set up, how you created these concept, pixels can be used in different ways, right? So in this case, in Pixel Deck, what do you do with the pixels? You have the decks, right? That's kind of I call it the container. Not sure if you like that word, but that's where you can put in or you can insert your pixels, right?
Absolutely. I mean, a container is not the most elegant word, but as somebody who was working with code, you are using the word a lot. But yeah, maybe it's a vessel or a jewel case. That's how Kevin described it. So the pixel, I mean, there are a few elegant thoughts about it. Once you look at the animation and you can say, hey, I own every pixel here, literally as a token in itself. And I think that's somehow an interesting thought and feels quite elegant. And on the other hand, yes, you also own the NFT, which is, like you said, the container. But that is, I mean, something that I think we are a bit familiar with that in our space, the ownership of NFTs. But that the NFT, becomes the container, and all these two things merge quite well, the NFT and the fungible tokens. Plus, that is the third layer, the real visual part, the artwork of it, the visualization is also 100% code-based. So it feels like a super native partnership between digital art that is on-chain and the smart contracts and the all the crypto encoding that is happening along the way. It feels like a very elegant and native way of creating art. And yeah, I think that's very appealing to me, and why I think this is something I want to explore more. It's not just but also, of course, discovering new possibilities and play around with new ideas, but also this is it just feels so elegant and pure and right that I want to explore that further.
And Kim, why? Because there is this conversation about the code being on chain, fully on chain. In your case, your collection, you said it that you wrote the smart contracts. Everything can be seen. I was reading a thread by the Chunks. It's another project, the Chunks founder, who was reviewing your code and going step by step, and he could understand everything, right? He could review your code because it's available, it's on chain. So why is this important, Kim, for you and in general for many people, that the code is on chain, and as you said, it's an elegant solution? What is, let's say, the disadvantages, maybe from an artistic point of view, but also technically, of the code not being on chain or having too many dependencies? What are the issues with that?
I mean, as somebody who has published art online since 15 years, I can tell you how many works just disappeared because of dependencies, of third-party dependencies that are no longer existent. Yeah, so for instance, I've worked with Google APIs that I just went out of business. Yeah, so the work is dead. And that is just one example. So along the way, if the work becomes too complex in terms of dependencies, the maintenance level also grows. That is one thing. On the other hand, I would come back to the elegance of the pureness if there are no dependencies. But also in that terms, I think especially, let's say you would just mint your artwork on a specific platform. Yeah, this platform goes out of business for any reason. That means your work is probably endangered to get lost. The work is either stored on a private server or on IPFS, but that means somebody needs to pay for the pinning to keep the work alive. When I put the work fully on chain, I as an artist pay an initial fee to bring the code on chain, but then it's there. Yeah, the fee has been paid. I don't need to pay more or have somebody else to keep it alive.
Yeah.
It's basically accessible
The blockchains
on the
on the
smart
blockchain. As long as the blockchain lives, the artwork, the code will live, right?
Exactly. I think, and I talked with a couple of people like Leander Herzog and Andreas Giesing. We talk a lot about JavaScript. Yeah, what does it mean? And I think it's even if we move to new levels of JavaScript or something that comes after that, it's still possible to have a very simple emulator. Yeah, so these works might really, live
Live
for
forever.
100 years or
Yes.
whatever. Yeah. So it's a code. JavaScript is a code language or a language that is very simple and straightforward to emulate. Yeah. I don't think, or it could even be translated into a different language. The code is there. The token can be valuable even still in 100 years, and the work can also be displayed and shown
in different ways.
the systems.
Screens, right? In different screens and systems. Yeah, that's a very valid point for collectors, right? That especially collectors that are entering the space and they don't know the differences. So these kind of technicalities ensure the longevity, right, of certain collections, certain pieces, certain artists. And I think you made a great point talking about platforms, right? How important it is as an artist to be kind of in control of your work, and that you make sure it's there for a long time. In this case, as the Ethereum blockchain lives, your work will be there, right? So that's really powerful. Kima, I have a couple of questions regarding the pixels movements, right? Because you mentioned you have been working with pixels for a long time. I think your algorithms have been very popular for many years. I think I once, when I was researching, found some of your algorithms on GitHub. So how does the movement works in this case, in your code? Because if we look at Pixel deck, the pixels are moving, and depending on how many pixels are in a certain deck, there are different shapes. And it's really interesting to see how the artwork evolves with a little amount of pixels to kind of saturate the text with a lot. I think you can, with millions of pixels, right? You can add. So how does the shapes take form? What's the kind of the logic behind the algorithm that moves the pixels in this case?
Yeah, I think you find a lot of generative art that makes use of specific algorithms or chunks of algorithms. I mean, you can maybe guess that if there are, let's say, a couple of very common algorithms and a lot of people use the same algorithms, you end up with similar behaviors and similar things, and that is, I think, visible. If you are deep enough into generative art, you see certain patterns reappearing everywhere. And I was more interested in finding my own patterns. That might mean that my code is certainly not as scientific or mathematical than many other things. I use not a bit. In all my projects, I use, for instance, Perlin noise or versions of Perlin noise. So that is an algorithm that has been optimized years ago to really create noise-like patterns. And I could never come up with something like that myself. So I rely on that. That is the third-party code that I use, but it's a small algorithm compared to a bigger library. So what I do, or what I wanted to do, is I wanted to move pixels. So what does that mean? A simple example would be if you are coding, the first thing that you learn, if it's getting more serious, is object-oriented coding. That means you create objects in your code, and objects can be instantiated as often as you like, let's say. But that all happens on the CPU of your computer, and it happens in the RAM of your computer. So there is a limit how far you can go. Let's say a few thousand objects, depending on their complexity, and then the computer cannot keep up. So if you want more stuff happening on your screen, you need to move to the graphics card directly. Yeah, so you move the important code to the GPU, and that means you can, in a fragment shader, in a so-called fragment shader, you can really write code for a pixel on screen, and that means it's really like a fixed position on your screen. With a coordinate of, let's say, x10 epsilon 10. So this is a specific pixel on your screen, and you write a code for exactly this pixel. And that introduces a completely different way of thinking compared to object-oriented programming. And it allows you, or your computer has the power to execute this code for this single pixel for all the pixels on your screen at the same time. So it's very, very powerful in terms of processing power. And that is something, it took me a while to wrap my head around it and get into it. But once I was in, I figured out, okay, there's a lot of things that I want to explore. And my work is always a mixture of defining a concept, but it's a very theoretical concept of how I want to work with algorithms. And I have a barely vision in which direction I want to go aesthetically, but I use code to find something and not to replicate something. So I don't code because I want to have a car with spinning wheels or something like I really want to discover some things that I cannot imagine. So that's how I work. I start coding and it's experimental, and either you find something that is surprising or you adjust and or restart and keep going. And I always have the pixel in mind. For me, it's a lot about pixels, and my research is how can pixels move on screen and what does that do to the spectators. And that is the thing that I'm looking for. It's not just, I'm looking for a beautiful image or a beautiful animation. I want something fascinating, and when I'm sitting in front of it and I'm surprised myself and captured, then
so it all happens, Kim. It all happens. So you playing with the code. Do you ever like sit to design with pen and paper mock-ups of what you wanna code, or it's directly in the code? Your process of ideation is directly with the code, no pen on
I
paper.
never make sketches, or I even never make notes. It's all in the code. I believe, for me, that's my own personal way of doing things. I believe if I have an idea and it's good enough, it will survive in my head. So I never write something down. That means, I'm always in the process. And with coding, it's the same. Of course I solve single or extracted problems also on paper. Yeah. So it's if you are facing something, okay, I need some little sketches here to understand what I want to do, but not to I don't sketch something and say, okay, now this is what I want to code. It's more the other way around. I need some sketches to solve some problems. But no, I never start with the sketch. I start with coding immediately, and that's what I really like, that it can go like this.
When did you start coding, Kim? Because you are somebody that you are very, very deep into art. You mentioned you went to art school, but your coding skills and I think are super advanced. And I think that's something that collectors and artists it's kind of a common knowledge that your pieces are very, very, very advanced, and the technology, coding wise, the optimization of you just mentioned you use a GPU, but in general, like feeding to different screens. So these details, you're somebody that your pieces look quite amazing across different screens, different ways of seeing the stuff. So I wonder, when did you start to code, Kim, and how did you got so good at it? It was a hobby, or did you actually work professionally as a coder? What can you tell us about your coding practice?
I mean, it started with getting early into computers. So my father brought a C64 home when I was still a young boy, and I was just fascinated by the aesthetic. And I mean, I knew this is a tool that you can just use, but you can
Mm-hmm.
also go deeper. And that's what I wanted. Yeah, it's, I think, quite early. It's like with most things, I really want to know and learn, and so it was a long process. I think I started coding. The first things were like creating my own websites for music that I produced. So it was like end of this when I launched my first website just to have a
Okay.
download for my own MP3s. So that's how you realize, okay, it's possible to make the computer do what you want and not just become a user of applications. You can really create applications, or at
Right.
the time it was rather called programs.
Mm.
Um, so I wanted to create programs, and I think this is what my work is still about, and why my work is never has a fixed aspect ratio. Yeah, so it's to some extent it's software art, and software means it doesn't mind the screen. So
Yeah.
the art doesn't mind the screen. It can
It will
run
adapt.
run on.
It
Yeah,
will
it
adapt to
adapts
the screen.
exactly, and it has to adapt to feel like a native, application, like a native part of our world. And our world
Mm.
is now, or computers are part of our world now, and not just, like something really, it's really deep in our culture now. I mean, we both are now sitting on a computer and communicating. So I want my art to be integrated into this world in a very native, or most native way that I can imagine. And that is basically a piece of software that adapts to any screen size, but also uses, like I said earlier, the graphics card. So really using the computer and really going deeper. And now even with the blockchain, going even one step deeper into this technology. Yeah, I mean, I coded. It took various steps. I even started to study technical informatics and learned a lot of Java theory at the time, but it was really hard for me to just start coding. So I basically dropped out and said, okay, I go to art school. Maybe that is more my thing. And
But
it
why
was.
was it hard? What was it hard to start coding?
If you never wrote something, it was really hard for me to just wrap my head around where to start. I understood already some, let's say, parts of it. Yeah, what is a function or an integer or this stuff? That's something you can read up, and it's easy to understand. But how to use it, and I think that comes down a lot to who teaches you the first bits. If somebody can explain it to you, it's it's easier, or explain it to you in a good way, it's easier. And that happened for me at the art school finally. So I had a professor, Joel Baumann, who told me, or taught us, the class, hey, this is processing. It's Java based. So I know already about Java. So this is a little application, yeah, that you can open. It has a play button. So it was self-explanatory. Is that the right word? Yeah, like, hey, you put your code in and you press play. And yeah, that opened up how I could easy get into coding. When it made click, I was like, okay, this is it. I was
Non-stop.
sitting in my I was sitting in my room for a month straight. I didn't left just to get some food, and we're just coding. And
Right.
I mean, when I reviewed the code from that time, it would be horrible, of course. But the point is that you just go. It's learning by doing. Yeah, coding is learning by doing. There's no other way. You cannot just learn a year and then start coding. It's 100% learning by doing, and that can only go, I think, along with your interest. Yeah, I've done a lot of commercial work in this field as well. Yeah, I worked with a lot of agencies from mostly London, automation, server automation, after script automation, After Effects automations, but also for companies in the German industry where it's more about the communication of a real-time production system to user interface, so a bit of user interface design. And that helped me, of course, also to understand that coding is not just like painting on a canvas. It takes more organization. It takes more project management. It
Yeah.
takes more
precision and
Yeah.
yeah, I know what you mean, that management, right? Management of the system, the I guess also like when you're working with companies and projects, deadlines, right, that you have to submit and you have to keep a very well organized, communication flow. So that's interesting. So you did work with companies and had commercial work at some point. Okay, that's something that I was.
All the time, basically. I mean, before NFTs, my work was not it was not able to monetize it in any way. And I mean, I did participate in, I don't know, 150 exhibitions. Meanwhile, I don't know, like, um, and you learn a lot, but it's never, you cannot make a living of that. Yeah, it's more for the sake of exhibiting, of showing your works. If you love that, then it's a passion, but it's nothing you make money with. So yeah, I always did freelancing and works on the side because my art practice was non-sustainable at
Yeah.
all, and I also didn't want to, bend to these institutional funding systems that are around. There are ways to get funding as an artist, but
Mhm.
you have then to play by certain rules. I somehow what I like a lot about art, or what is maybe the most important thing for me about art, is there are no rules. Yeah, that's art. Art has no rules. Everything can be art, and everybody can be an artist. You just have to do it, and that was what I wanted, and that also meant I had to go through a lot of pain and suffer to
To
keep
get to
going.
the yeah,
And
to get where you are today. So yeah, it was a long time until you discover NFTs. But even, I mean, there are many artists that were at the like you, when this NFT started to to get traction, but there aren't that many artists that have evolved their practice since that time. And I think Pixel Deck is a great example of that, how you kept your style but you kept pushing the boundaries, right, of what's possible. And I'm very curious, Kim, because it feels like Pixel Deck is kind of a series, right, of works. You mentioned how the pixels work. In this case, the decks are the NFT. But are you planning more pieces that work with this system, with the pixel system? Is that something you have in mind? Maybe something you are already working on, or not sure yet? What's the plan there?
yeah, I think of Pixel as an ecosystem. Absolutely. The idea is these fungible tokens can be used for anything else. Yeah. So
Mm.
absolutely, the plan is that it will be a little work series, or I mean a work series. Let's remove the word little because it doesn't really say anything. But yeah, it should be a series of a few works that are all connected through the pixel token. I cannot tell much now because I just finished the first part of it, and I think now I need a bit of a distance to the work and see how is it perceived, because that is, for me as an artist, that is very important. How's the perception of the work? Yeah, I put it out without a clear message. The work
Mhm.
doesn't has a message, so it forms its message in itself. Spectators form or discover the message of the work by just having it out. And sure, if your work gets enough attention, that the threshold of people that is necessary to create a meaningful interpretation of the work really happens. Yeah, and that is something that I also want to observe now and see what is this work really? Yeah,
Yeah.
what is it? Yeah, that is something that I will check out. And
And so this is
from
social media, right? In social media, you check these. How do you get this feedback usually, Kim? Just by looking at social media, talking with other artists, collectors. How do you get these? How do you measure the reception in general of a piece?
I mean, yeah, at first, of course, everything that I see is happening online. Yeah, the work is happening online. So that is the part. But sure, also if you talk to real people in real life, and yeah, like on any topic, yeah, I try to gather these informations. And it's also super interesting to observe people in an exhibition setup, especially people who have no background informations, and it just encountering or have the first view on something new. What do they say? Are they excited, and what is happening to them? I think I really want to learn from that, because that is something I want to express. Yeah, I want people to like the work. Maybe that's like, you put a lot of work in it, and somehow I don't want to educate people in any way. Yeah, that is not what I want. I want to make people happy in a way, and capture their attention with something even, meaningless or banal, something that is what I think is real art. It has no, it has no purpose. It doesn't solve a world problem, or it's not propaganda. It's just an extension of what we already know, and maybe maybe even it has some decorative properties. It's still, if it still gets into the heads of people, then it's more, then I would say it's much more than decoration. It creates the meaning somewhere on the way.
Yeah, and I think Pixel Deck can do that, as you mentioned, for the blockchain audience, but also for newcomers, and to start these discussions about what's possible in this medium, right? So you mentioned how you have always worked with internet art. This is kind of the new internet, right? So this is a new phase, and your work is playing with that. I can imagine how so many discussions can spark, and even from the mechanics, because I was chatting yesterday on Twitter on the pixels, and how I think there is an allowance, right? Each deck you can mint 500,000 pixels, but then you have an extra allowance of 500,000 more, right? So these mechanics, it's really nice, because it's also what you see in general, right? With the blockchain, like allowances, and how many can I mint, and is there a limit? And then if I want to buy or collect more, where do I do that? So all these discussions, I think your piece captures in a really nice way. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to the continuation, if there is. How long did it take to complete this project, Kim? Because compared to your previous projects, let's maybe think about Cargo or Monogrids, some of your collection, Nazca, which is, I think, my favorite one, actually, Nazca on FX Hash. Time-wise, how complex was Pixel Deck compared to your previous releases?
That's always difficult to answer, because usually I don't start to work on something and work on it until the end. So you always have times where you just need to do something else. So let's say I work maybe always on 2 or 3 works at the same time, like on the same day, but there's then at some point I just need to get away and do something else. But I started the first code experiments for Pixel Dex was March 25, 24, of course. So it took almost a year from the first coding, and before that I also already started thinking about it. So I think this project ran over a year almost, while sure other projects can happen much quicker. I think it's never just a few days. That is not possible for me, because I want a certain complexity, and I want a certain aesthetic that is I'm looking for. Sometimes it can happen that you have a work, let's say, for instance, monogrid, and in the monogrids, I see a specific detail that feels so appealing and interesting to me that I want to explore that detail further. So I try to extract that chunk of code that produces this detail, and try to see or figure out where can I go with that. And with a bit of luck, of course, that can be something, let's say, fast. So in a few days you can maybe create a new interesting work, but that is a lucky shot, basically. Usually I work months on something, and especially now with Pixel Dex, there's the initial artwork, or the core artwork, the visual code, but there's also a website around it. this website is like a project on its own. Yeah, the website alone takes 1 or 2 months. Then you have the smart contracts. My smart contracts, I mean, meanwhile, I think it's very important that they are more or less bulletproof. Yeah. So I write unit tests for it. It's really software development on a very high level, and not just, okay, I code my thing and that's it. So I really try to be very safe on that level. And then, yeah, it piles up. It's the last 10% suddenly the last 50% again.
Yeah, I can imagine. I can imagine. And yeah, you mentioned that was something in my mind, how to protect um, your smart contract, and in this case, tokens, fungibles, because this is a very ambitious project where you kind of took control over everything, but then that comes with, kind of a certain price in terms of, okay, so now all the background, everything that's running in the background needs to be perfect as well, right? From a technical perspective, not even the aesthetic part, right? Like what you mentioned, the smart contract, the transferring, the allowance claiming, all this stuff. So yeah, that's amazing, Kim. And a question I like to ask all the guests is to mention artists that inspired them. Can you mention 3 artists, Kim, that inspire you? You mentioned Leander Herzog and Andreas Kissin, which are artists that work in a similar, let's call it current, right? They work with the internet, and it's kind of the same movement, I will say. They are, I guess, you communicate with them a lot. Is that right? You talk a lot with Andreas and Leander?
Yeah, absolutely. We are in nearly daily conversations, and sure, if I have something interesting and they approve it as interesting, then I know it's good. No, we have, I think, a pretty direct and critical view on each other. And in general, I mean, yeah, it is really hard to say where to take inspiration from. I think if you want to make art, it's maybe better to take the inspiration from something else than art. But of course, there are a bunch of artists that surprised and therefore inspired me over the years. It started for me through the net art scene with a lot of people, Jody, for instance, or Ubermorgen.com, who showed me, okay, there's what is even possible. And then I got more into aesthetical things like these computer club members, Raphael Rosendahl, and also Sabrina Rath, and a lot of people who created very deep aesthetical works that you can follow over many, many years, and you see, this is really one person creating a stream of things. And yes, I mean, sure, then when I got deeper into coding, there were Casey Reese and the people around the processing community, and there were a lot of people. So it's hard to just name a few, because it would do it justice. I would forget too many. So I just named a few out of my head, but I cannot say there's a favorite or a few favorites. Yeah, it's the overall spirit, and if somebody can keep you interested over a longer time, then I would say, okay, this is really interesting and outside.
Awesome. That's great. Kim, thanks so much for taking the time to explain Pixel Dex and all your art journey. It has been amazing to learn from you, and I hope we can do it again in the future.
All right, Carlos, thanks for having me, and yeah, see you around.